Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Ankit.
How are you doing, sir?
Oh, fine, thank you.
Sir, a few days ago, you tweeted about the demise of a dear friend of yours, Shri Mamidi Ram Reddy Garu. Could you please elaborate his life and your journey working with him?
Ankit, not only was he a personal friend and a very important person in my life, elderly person, elder brother, he was also a pioneer in understanding the cooperative movement and spreading democratic values and in bringing clarity to many issues around which there is a lot of confusion in the country on issues of constitution, the role of the state, the role of the people's organizations like societies, cooperatives, and others. He was a remarkable human being. As a person, he was a rare embodiment of integrity, commitment, perseverance, uncompromising idealism, and tremendous degree of pragmatism and a sense of strategy in accomplishing the goals for the people. His role was instrumental not only in the Cooperative Development Foundation and the cooperative movement in the country and creating a legal and constitutional framework conducive to cooperative movement, but also in democratic movement, Foundation of Democratic Reforms, Lok Sabha. He has been a co-founder with me. And there are many things that I learned from him in understanding the role of the citizen in the state, the importance of decentralization, and so on and so forth. He was a pillar of strength. One of his great qualities was he built leadership in a country where leadership is not built easily. He built leadership from seemingly unknown quarters. Some very fine leadership emerged under his tutelage. For instance, CDF and its organizations now have very vibrant leadership that is nurtured from the grassroots. People who did not have much of a background or great education, but they are now very effective and very powerful leaders, transforming the cooperatives and spreading the movement. That was his very unique quality. And any amount of verbiage, he had the great quality to remove the chaff and go into the nub of the problem. And a man of uncompromising values. He would not spare anybody, including himself. There was no cant or hypocrisy, and there was no malice in him. What you see is what you get from him. A rare human being, a towering strength to many of us, and a great citizen. It was a truly great loss.
So there are about 8 lakh cooperatives in the country. Cooperatives that extend credit to its members are about 2 lakhs, and non-credit cooperatives are about 6 lakh. What exactly is a cooperative, sir, and what is the problem that they're trying to address?
I think much of Ram Reddy's life, particularly after 1975, was around this. For whatever reason, he started his life with local governments. He was elected in Rajendra Panchayat Samiti, one of the earliest in the country, very highly reputed. Then he went on a Fulbright fellowship to the United States to understand the democratic system, the cooperative functioning and agrarian sector there, and so on and so forth. And then he dedicated his life to cooperatives for the past 50 years of his life. Just a few months ago, he and I participated in the 50th anniversary of the Cooperative Development Foundation. Little did we know that that would be my last meeting with him. And that probably was the last major public event in which he participated. So, what are cooperatives? Before that, let's circle back a little bit. What is the role between the citizen and the state? What is the dividing line? The state is not the primary organism. Citizen and her liberty are primary. In Ram Reddy's philosophy, in my philosophy, in Lok Sabha's philosophy, the state is an artificial entity created for our collective needs. Now, when the needs are clearly for the collective in an undefined manner, everybody needs it, then the state. But when a community of stakeholders come together to form an organization, it is not the state. The stakeholders may be for a reason of art, It may be for reason of preservation of nature. No, we want a rock climbing society, or we want something to preserve the ecology of a certain area, or to promote a certain art, or a traditional craft. No, there are 100 things, whatever we want as human beings. As long as we do not hurt another human being, we do not cause any harm to another human being or abridge somebody else's freedom, we are free to do whatever we like. That was Mr. Ram Reddy's abiding faith. That was what he fought for. Whereas in India, the assumption from day one was the state is all-encompassing, and only when the state grants you the liberty to do something, you're allowed to do something. An unacceptable proposition in a democracy. Mr. Ram Reddy always fearlessly, unflinchingly fought against that kind of a notion of government monopoly. The notion of any public official in the country is that everything she surveys or he surveys is that of the government, and people are there at the behest of the government. People are there at the mercy of the government. Mr. Ram Reddy completely rejected that notion. Government is there to serve a specific, limited function that's entrusted by us, the people, to it, with the tax money that we pay. Government is not the be-all and end-all. Government is, after all, our servant. And its role, apart from fulfilling the collective needs which cannot be otherwise fulfilled, is only to ensure that we exercise our liberty in a manner that is responsible, so that other people's liberty is not curtailed. Beyond that, the state has no role. He was absolutely clear about that. Then we look at cooperatives or any other form of organization. Take societies. You can form societies for any purpose. Now, even during the British time or during the Nizam's time, the society's law was extraordinarily liberal, except to a limited extent of registering and monitoring to ensure there is no unlawful activity. The state simply did not play any role at all. When in Andhra Pradesh at that time, the combined Andhra Pradesh state, in the guise of combining the Nizam's law in Telangana and the Madras Presidency law in Andhra area, they came up with a very bad hodgepodge, a law that basically controls the society's function. That means even the liberties allowed during the colonial or feudal rule were denied to us in democratic India. I remember vividly when he called me in an evening and said, the AP legislature is about to enact it tomorrow, it's going to be put up for vote. I want you to intervene and get it stopped. Immediately I talked to the minister concerned, Mr. Ashoka Jaiprakash, who is now a governor. He was a minister, and promptly he withdrew it from the floor of the House and then entrusted it to a committee. Then I gave evidence before the committee, and we brought eminent people like L.C. Jain to give evidence before the legislative committee, and we made sure that the law for the combined state of Andhra Pradesh was a sensible one, a liberal one, in keeping with the traditions of the British and Nizam's days. So that's the degree of clarity that he brought to the table. Now go to cooperatives. They're also another form of organization, another society, another group. The citizens come together, form an organization to pursue their own collective goals. But as a general principle, cooperatives also have economic goals, whereas the society may have non-economic goals. It may be anything practically. Cooperative, by definition, is some kind of a commercial enterprise to do things collectively. And why do we require cooperatives? Really, you can form a company. Not everybody can form a company. You don't have the scale, you don't have the money, you don't have the wherewithal. So what cooperatives do typically in a country like India is, by collectivization, but on equal footing, you bring four things to the farmer, let's say the farmer's cooperatives or somebody else's cooperatives. One is scale. That means capital. Individually, we are not able to mobilize enough money, but together we can mobilize enough. Technology. Technology costs money. Technology requires skills. Individually, we may not possess it, but collectively, we can bring that. The third is management, high quality management. Now, we cannot hire a competent manager for a small enterprise, a tiny enterprise, but collectively, we can get the best managers. And the fourth, perhaps most important of all, access to markets. Even if you have a good product, good technology, good management, if you don't access markets, you are dead. Everything is ultimately to produce something that is saleable, to fulfill somebody else's need. Now, marketing is possible only when you have the scale. what Dr. Varghese Kurian has done in terms of dairy cooperatives is a classic case of bringing all this together. While individual producer produces only a liter or two of milk in his backyard with a buffalo or cow, there's no way you could actually modernize that sector with individual producers acting in isolation. The moment you collectivized it, you have the scale that gives you the capital, the technology, the management, and the market. So with the Amul brand or Vijaya brand or some other brand, you are able to sell now globally or within the country. That is the idea of a cooperative in terms of economic enterprise. But unfortunately, somehow in India, thanks to the baggage of the socialist era, the assumption is anything that's built in the country is at the behest of the government. Dr. Kurian used to say, the government believes that the cooperatives are created by the government, nurtured by the government, destroyed by the government. Government, therefore, is Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, the Trimurti of Indian Trinity, which is absurd. It's as if government is primary and people are secondary. No, people are primary. Government is an incidental secondary to fulfill the people's needs. It's a creature of the people. People are not the creature of the government. So cooperative philosophy, for which Mr. Ramareddy fought and all of us fought, at heart is this struggle. Who has the primacy? Is it the state or is it the people? And therefore, is the people's collective and voluntary participation in a commercial activity in the form of a cooperative enterprise, or the state that arrogates to itself all power to destroy, to do whatever it likes? Obviously, the constitution is with us, the people. The state has a limited role, but not understood adequately in a country like India because our democracy is very flawed. And our democratic culture itself is very flawed. Therefore, in the face of monumental hurdles, he fought for a lifetime and we all fought together to do our bit to liberate cooperatives in the clutches of government. Government has a role in monitoring any organization's activities to the extent that your activities might be harmful to some others. They may abridge some others' liberty. They may harm the consumers or the environment. That's perfectly legitimate. But Ramareddy's clarion call always says that the government has no right to control any enterprise, whatever be the form, any more than any other enterprise. Just because it's a cooperative, you don't arrogate yourself extra power to regulate or control. You can regulate and control only to the extent that you regulate and control any other similar organization performing a similar function or undertaking a similar business in order to protect the general public from harm. You cannot say, because it's a cooperative, I control. Whereas until Ramareddy came along, until Kurian came along, until we fought together, the general approach is that cooperatives are created by the government. They can be destroyed by the government. Government must control them. It is a natural order. I remember vividly when in Andhra Pradesh state, which was the first state to enact a very liberal cooperative law, Mutually Aided Cooperative Societies Act, MAX Act, or famous MAX Act. A government, for purely partisan political reasons, removed all the cooperative dairies from the purview of the Act and took over the cooperatives in the middle of the night, literally, by an ordinance. Now, we launched a massive battle. I remember I went to the Chief Minister's district, opposition leaders' district, the dairy minister's district, and demonstrated that the government was uttering lies in giving justification for taking over. They pretended as if they were trying to improve the efficiency, whereas the Chief Minister's district, Kadapa at that time, the opposition leaders' district, Chittoor at that time, and the dairy minister's district, Godavaris at that time, all three government-controlled cooperatives were defunct, they were destroyed. And the government claims that the people-controlled cooperatives must be controlled by the government to make them more efficient. There cannot be a more laughable argument. I went to each of those towns and publicly demonstrated, and there was no response at all. Then we had to fight this battle in the Supreme Court. A very eminent lawyer, I mention the name also, Shanti Bhushan, towering lawyer. He was the man whose courtroom pyrotechnics, his legal acumen, made a prime minister lose her office in the famous case of Raebareli election case. Raj Narayan, he was Raj Narayan's lawyer. and the court held against the then Prime Minister. And that led to many consequences, including leading up to the emergency in the country. Post-emergency, Mr. Shanti Bhushan became the Law Minister of India in the Morarji Desai government. I think Morarji Desai government. Now, a man of such credentials, much, much later, sometime in 2006 or so, 5 or 6, when the cooperatives were taken over by the government unjustly and unconstitutionally, I went to him and said, look, you must fight this case. The moment I asked him, he said immediately he agreed. And we were having lunch at his place. Midway through lunch, I asked him, what is your belief about cooperatives? Do you believe government should control them? He said, of course government should control them. Otherwise, no, they'll all go astray. Because that's the traditional thinking about house building cooperatives, some other cooperative. I said, then sorry, I don't want you to be entrusted with my case. You're not the fit person. He said, look, I'm a leading lawyer. I never take up cases like this because I know you, I respect you. I've accepted the moment you asked me, and you're eating my food at my dining table. And you say, you don't want me to represent you. I said, look, I have respect for you as a person and as a lawyer, but not in this case, because our understanding of the Constitution is that the cooperatives are autonomous. Government has no right to control them any more than they control any other organization. If you believe that government has a natural right to control these organizations, then you're not the fit lawyer for me. I'm fighting a much larger constitutional cause. It's not a technical issue. Therefore, I'm sorry, I have to withdraw this case from you. Then we requested Mr. P.P. Rao, and he did a marvelous job. We won the case. So the point I'm making is, even at that level, eminent jurists with immense experience and a sense of the Constitution were confused because of the prevailing norm at that time, that cooperatives are controlled by the government naturally. That is the mindset, and that is the legal and political context in which we had to fight. That we come this far, that the Max Act's in place, then the 97th Amendment to the Constitution, by which under Article 19(1)(c), the right of the people to form cooperatives and run them is clearly recognized on par with societies and trade unions. It's actually implicit always. We had to make it explicit because of the judicial confusion. That we could accomplish that is a tribute in large measure to Mr. Ram Reddy and many other people who fought for the cooperative autonomy and democratic freedoms in this country.
So speaking about this fight and the struggle for cooperative autonomy, from Max Act in 1995 to 97th Constitutional Amendment in 2011, your struggle, your support for cooperatives has been as old as, or even more than, more old than FDR Lok Satta movement itself.
Something like 90s.
Correct.
Probably in the 1980, 81, the seeds were sown. Until that time, I didn't know anything about cooperatives.
Right.
They're just some form of organization. In my village, I remember there was a cooperative bank. Nobody knew what happened. We knew the person, Mr. Venkatramaya, a well-known person. Nobody knew about the funds, whom the money was lent, and what happened. We had no clue. And as a public servant, what was the natural thinking in 1970s and early 80s? Government is everything. We are still in that semi-socialist mindset, though socialism obviously was failing, and we recognized that government is not the best manager of many enterprises. But still, the intuitive thinking is that anything that is there, government must control it. That was the norm. My scales have fallen on the larger issue of government and the government's ability to control or run enterprises when I was special officer of Vizag Steel Plant. On behalf of the state government, I was taking care of the coordination, land acquisition, rehabilitation, labor relations, and so on and so forth. Basically, a liaison between union government and the state in respect to the steel plant, a large enterprise. At that time, India's largest public enterprise in terms of investment made. And I discovered to my horror that public sector in India is the private sector of those in public office. It has nothing to do with the people of the country. The word public is very deceptive. It is very seductive. It's entirely, as you know, Kenneth Arrow, for instance, in public choice theory, talks about how the rulers always manipulate things to their advantage. Here, the ruling class, the public sector workers and the managers and others, they are manipulating the system for their advantage, utilizing the public sentiment of public sector. Even today, unfortunately, that unthinking norm prevails. Anything public is good and noble. Anything private is bad and unacceptable. It's a normal tendency without thinking through. Even as our actions actually completely belie that. When you want to buy something, you go to the market and buy the best product. You make a choice among many competing products. But we forget that is private. And the market works best because the buyer has a choice and the producer has to compete. And both are free. Producer to compete and buyer to buy. And that's how the market works. It's not because the producer or the buyer are moral entities that the outcome is good. It's because they compete fiercely in pursuit of their self-interest that the outcome is good. Now, this revelation came to me only with the experience of Visakhapatnam Steel Project in 1984-85. So this whole gamut of issues relating to public and private sector, the market, and then the societies, and then the cooperative societies as enterprise, all this slowly kept dawning on me. Then I was in the cooperative bank, chief executive of the two apex cooperative banks, the long-term credit and short-term credit in Andhra Pradesh. Already I knew Mr. Ram Reddy earlier. In 1981, as part of my training, I was in a place called Mulkanur, a wonderful cooperative built by a great man, a great friend of mine called A.K. Vishwanath Reddy. Very, very successful cooperative, a brilliant leader, a man of abundant common sense and foresight and integrity and competence. In 13 villages, I think, he transformed the villages by that multipurpose cooperative. It's a great model, one of the finest in the country. So while I was studying that as part of my training, I came in contact with Mr. Ram Reddy and the ideas of cooperative movement and cooperation and the citizen of the state. And my later work in respect of public sector taught me the invaluable lesson that public sector of India is not really about the public, it's about the people who run those institutions. And therefore, a small government where you cannot take away the government, it is a natural monopoly, but functioning very competently and under public scrutiny with effective accountability is the best thing, rather than giving government overarching powers to control every facet of our lives. Your whole license permit laws destroyed Indian economy. It made us paupers. It gave us very little choice. And goods were in short supply. Shortages were endemic. Corruption, therefore, became ubiquitous in the country. So consequences were there for everybody to see. That was the backdrop. Around the time of economic reform is when I became the chief executive of the cooperative banks in the month of March 1991. Within a few months before the economic reform process began, I think June, July reform process began with the famous budgets of Dr. Manmohan Singh. So I already imbibed that philosophy. I remember on the 4th of May 1991, Clive Crook, the then economist's editor, one of the editors, he wrote a brilliant 28-page essay on Indian economy. How terrible it is, how license permit laws destroyed us. It was a masterly analysis. I made hundreds of copies of that and sent to many friends and colleagues and journalists and editors and others across the country, I remember at the time. There was no email in those days. It had to be painstakingly Xeroxed and then mailed. They were all dinosaurs in those days. So that was the backdrop. So, and my work in cooperatives taught me how the government's control has completely stifled and destroyed the cooperative structure, destroyed the leadership, led to bankruptcy of the institutions, made them dysfunctional, and the shareholders and the people, they suffered, their interests suffered. And the politicians were making hay because they were expanding their political influence at the cost of the institutions. The bureaucrats were making both money and exercising undue power. So everybody was happy except the members and the recipients of the cooperative enterprise, people who should get something out of it. They are the ones who are suffering. And I fought a very strong battle against the government's monopoly. But that was a lone battle, isolated battle, without any legal framework. I simply bulldozed the government. I said, look, I will not follow the government's orders. I remember vividly, and that indicates the malaise in government in respect of control of these institutions. That was in the wake of loan waiver. VP Singh government just left power, and Tao, Chaudhary Devilal came in with agricultural loan waiver. And because the climate created in my cooperative banks, I was heading at the state level, only 8% money was recovered, 92% was not coming back. For a banking institution, if 92% money is not coming back, it is dead. If 8% is not coming back, it's bad. In 2014-15, when the current union government took over, the recovery rate was not as good as it should be. Therefore, the default level measured by non-performing assets was about 12.5%. The banks were in deep red. They were losing annually 80,000, 90,000 crores together. So imagine not 12.5% non-performing assets, but 92.5% non-performing assets, or 92% non-performing assets. So the bank was practically dead. That's when I took over, without even knowing anything about what's happening. When I studied and understood what was wrong, I decided the following things are required from common sense. I was not an expert in banking, but from common sense, from what I understood and learned from the people who knew banking, I realized that certain things were required in order to put the banks in a sound footing, recover the money, and make them instruments useful to the farming community in the service of the farmers and the small businessmen. I went to the regulator in the state, the Commission of Cooperation, or RCS in those days, they were called Registrar Cooperative Societies. No, they were a terror all over the country. Registrar Cooperative Societies is a terror for all cooperatives, for all the 8 lakh cooperatives we're talking about now. I explained to the senior officer, look, this is a problem. The following things are required. And for me to be able to do these things, I require legally the facilitating mechanism. And you are the regulator of this law. And government and you must make sure that this happens in order for me to be able to do what it takes to make the bank survive and serve the people. He said, we won't do it. We agree with you, but we won't do it. I said, what is this tamasha? Either you agree and you do it, or you don't agree because I don't know much about it. My understanding is flawed, my analysis is wrong. Therefore, you correct me. But if you agree that I'm right, you agree with what I'm saying, but you won't do it, I don't know how to respond to that. He said, no, why are you bothered about all that? It's a normal thing. Just enjoy your perks and privileges and the expense account. I said, I'm sorry, that's not the reason why I'm here. And I'm sorry I wasted your time. I stood up, thanked him for his attention and patience, and told him I will never again bother him and test his patience because it's a waste of his time, clearly. And I walked out and I summoned all my senior officials. I told them, henceforth, the State Cooperative Act does not exist for this bank, these banks, 2 banks. And the Commission of Cooperation does not exist for these banks. We function under the RBI Act and the Banking Regulation Act. That is true. And I ignore these 2 laws. If any official at any point of time, when I take a decision, obstructs it or objects to it on the ground that it's not in accordance with the cooperative law of the state, I will sack them forthwith. And I give written instructions. And I never again bothered about the cooperative law or the Commission of Cooperation. The bank thrived. We did whatever it took, and the bank thrived. So, but that was by an act of defiance. Because luckily, I was allowed that kind of autonomy. The state government did not choose to throw me out instantly. They respected my competence, maybe, or decision, or credibility, and I could make things happen. But institutionally, I had no power. I simply took over power. So the challenge is, how do you institutionally empower the cooperatives, allow them to exercise the freedom that is inherent in the Constitution? That was the battle we fought since then. And that's how the Max Act came. That's how the 97th Amendment came in 2011. And one of my proudest moments is that I could send the law as enacted, finally signed by the President, to Dr. Varghese Kurian during his lifetime, the last year of his life. I could send him as a gift because he fought for it throughout his life. Dr. Varghese Kurian was one of the mentors of my life. I'm privileged to have mentors with whom I became close friends and in whose field of operation I could make some contribution later on in life. And 97th Amendment is one of my small little tribute to the genius of Varghese Kurian and to the constitutional values that the cooperative movement enshrined.
Right. So, your act of defiance in the cooperative bank during that was in 1991, like you mentioned. The Max Act was in 1995, again, even early years of the economic reforms of 91. 2011 is when you enacted, helped enact made the Constitutional Amendment Act. But in 2025, sir, when markets are developed much better, there is opportunity available for people to access the market, scale up. Do you think cooperatives are still relevant?
Very much so. Very much so. But with certain differences. In the earlier era, the assumption is that cooperatives are the only form of organization available to the farmers and small producers. And therefore, while at one level the government stifled them by control and all kinds of interference, undue interference, they also gave the cooperative system a relatively generous laws. For instance, they were generally exempt from taxes in those days. As a bank chief executive, I was not paying any income tax or corporate tax on the cooperative's profit. Now, once you have a genuine market economy, you can't have such privileges. Therefore, cooperatives are quite understandably, while some cooperatives are unhappy about that, they were treated on par with any other company. My argument is it's a fair thing because you cannot ask for a privilege and then you cannot ask for freedom. Once you depend on the government, by definition, you are now dependent. You cannot then seek independence. Therefore, it's only fair that you seek independence. And also don't seek any special favors from the government. That change is inevitable. The second is, earlier cooperatives enjoyed a monopoly in certain areas. For instance, credit institutions or even dairy cooperatives. The general rules in many states said, if there is a cooperative operating in a certain area, there cannot be a private dairy coming within the area of operation, basically preventing the free market to operate. Now, you cannot believe in free market and competition and then say dairy must have a monopoly. So that also over time has gone, which is a good thing. Then why do you require the cooperatives? Correct. For the reasons I mentioned in the beginning. Scale. Now, quite understandably, any entrepreneur is seeking profit. That's legitimate. It's necessary. But when the producer, in this case the farmer or the dairy producer or somebody else, or a small trader or somebody else, is inherently weak, there's an asymmetry of power. In the face of the market forces, the producer is somewhat helpless. It's not an equitable relationship. When does market work? When the producer and the seller, there are multiple producers and sellers, there's genuine, true competition, and they're completely free. Now, on paper, the producer may be free, but in reality, there are so many factors. Credit system is not working in favor of the small producers. Informal credit is very costly or inaccessible. They are in the hands of the wholesale merchants who also provide informally credit and therefore hold them to ransom. They cannot really sell in the market as they please. There's no law which is preventing them from selling in the market freely. The institutional structures underpinning the functioning of the farmer locally is preventing him from exercising that freedom. So in effect, the free market is not operating. The second is the scale. When multiple producers produce small quantities, you have no capacity to have an impact on the market or to value add significantly, or to realize the best price, or to do the logistics operation like transport, storage, processing, grading, and so on and so forth. But when you scale up the form of a cooperative and a collective entity, then all these are available to you. So, for two primary reasons. One is to remove the asymmetry of power that is inherent when a small producer is dealing with the market players. And two, to ensure that all the logistics are in place for you to get the best value for the product. Society benefits and the cooperative and the producer benefits. For that reason, cooperatives are necessary. You don't have to go far. Go to United States, go to many rich countries, OECD countries. Even today, much of the agricultural trade, much of the agricultural input supply is through cooperatives. So as a mode of organization for small producers, when the asymmetry of power, and to ensure market access and to ensure logistics chain is complete, cooperatives are an invaluable organization. It doesn't mean they enjoy a monopoly. Supposing a private sector entity is doing a better job, so be it. So be it. Therefore, in order to be able to serve well, the cooperatives also must provide the leadership capabilities and managerial capabilities. Without that, you will not be able to survive. Once you have that, if the market is not always working in favor of the small producers, the cooperative becomes a very valuable ally. And the market also behaves well because there is no competition. If that competition is not there, sometimes the market can be to the detriment of the small producer because the small producer has no power to withstand the market forces.
Right. So we see that farmers, particularly of late, have been forming farmer producer organizations, FPOs as they are called, and they are doing really well. So how does how are these two different? How are FPOs different than
Really,
cooperatives?
the objective is the same. The four things I mentioned: access to capital, technology, management, and market. They apply to both equally well. It's just a form of organization. Cooperative is one form of organization. Because the tradition of cooperatives is very unhealthy in this country. Political interference and politicization has become endemic in this country. A new form of organization sometimes helps. FPOs are a new form of organization for the same purpose, roughly in a similar manner, but don't have the baggage of the past. They don't come under the cooperative society, the registrar or somebody else, etc. And therefore, they can pursue their goals much better. So really, it's the same. To me, these are all stakeholder organizations. It doesn't matter by what name you call it. This is about stakeholder empowerment and autonomy to the stakeholders, protecting the small man in the vagaries of the market and with the government's perfidious control.
The model that you talked about, sir, it worked really well for us in the dairy sector led by Varghese Kurian, like you mentioned. Why haven't we able to replicate that in other sectors?
It's a great question. One of the reasons is the nature of dairy sector. Without collectivization, the processes required to really do business in dairy are not possible. Without chilling, pasteurization, and without processing. And if the production is excessive, more than the demand on the day, milk will spoil easily. Therefore, unless you convert it into high-value products later, cheese, butter, milk powder, other things, you are getting lost. Therefore, there is a necessity. Whereas in many other commodities, you don't feel that imminent loss. There is actually loss. Horticulture, for instance, 10% produce is habitually lost. But you don't feel it's being lost today.
Correct.
Oftentimes, it's lost at the consumer level. So consumers, they're simply discarding it or something. And that's why we're talking about integrated supply chains and the processing industry inherent, and then storage and grading and packaging, they're all required, etc. But milk, it's instant. Because by evening, if it's exposed to the sun and you don't bother, it's getting spoiled.
Yes.
So the necessity itself created the need for scale. Scale created the need for collectivization because individually you don't have enough scale. And then the NDDB and Varghese Kurian's model gave us a fantastic combination. For instance, the farmer produces, but even for 1 liter that you produce, there's a sample taken out, specially tested so that each individual is held to account. It's not the collective. They don't put all the milk in one big can and then test the sample. Each individual supply is tested. The 5 ml is taken, that is tested, and you get according to the specifications of that particular sample. So the farmer's incentive is retained with the benefits of collectivization. It's a unique model. I don't know if another country has adopted this. It's very unique to India, probably. And this kind of a combination worked beautifully.
Okay. Do you think that you talked about in the current form, cooperatives as they exist right now, they need a few changes. What are those few changes or reforms that you would like to see in the cooperatives?
It's not so much a legal reform because the law is already in place. Specific state laws may still not be in place properly, but the constitution is sacrosanct. It's a matter of time. But the real challenge is, how do you create leadership? See, you may change the law, but you can't order leadership. That has to be nurtured. And we kill leadership because local governments are dead. Rural areas are deprived of talent because anybody who has ability and who has ambition is not living in villages any longer. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, A.K. Vishwanath Reddy stayed in a village. Today, Vishwanath Reddy would not stay in a village. Because he has ambition, he has ability, he would be urban. Because economy has moved to urban areas. Agriculture share is now only 14-15% of the GDP and is declining every year. If you have ambition and ability, why will you be stuck with a low-yielding portfolio? So leadership is no longer there. Two, politics is now encompassing everything. Even if law says they're away from the political control or legal control, structurally, political parties, local units have so much of influence and reach. They don't allow anybody, including a non-profit organization, a voluntary organization, to function. Very rarely, with exceptional charisma and great ability and credibility and public support, some organizations are able to survive without political interference. Otherwise, today politics is capturing everything in society. Cooperatives are no exception. So given that, nurturing leadership is important. Second is, if the members look for a short-term benefit, ignoring the long-term loss sustained by that, then a cooperative will not function. Only when the member patronizes it, and that means the member must realize what's the value of patronizing it. If today I get a fast buck, but ultimately tomorrow I'm suffering, I don't think of tomorrow. I fall for some market player. I don't really protect my self-interest. Then cooperative cannot survive. When I supply to the cooperative, when I buy from the cooperative in turn what I need, can the business be sustained? If I don't do that, you have only an organizational namesake, and I'm not sufficiently aware of my own needs, my own economic future, and costing and benefit, then the cooperative will not survive. So apart from the regulatory problems, these are the two challenges. And the third one, of course, is always money, money, money. Where do you find the money to sustain the operations? Sometimes it works out well, sometimes it doesn't. But Mr. Ramareddy's model, for instance, is primarily depend on the individual thrift. The members over time will have to have thrift. We don't depend on external sources. It's a great model, but it probably is not a sustainable model beyond a point, because a poor society by definition needs more capital infusion, because we're in a growth phase. We're poor. And by definition, poor societies don't have enough capital to foster future growth. And therefore, it may not be entirely feasible to say, I don't want credit, I will only depend on thrift. But it's wonderful to depend on thrift as much as possible, so that you are on a much stronger wicket. And Mr. Ramareddy always believed in that, primarily focusing on your own savings and thrift, so that your over-reliance on external borrowings is reduced. But you do require credit. So for all these reasons, you do require to really especially act. You require to handhold them, to encourage them, to strengthen them. In a country where we are notoriously bad in organizing, you require some genuine people who are experienced or wise to help us to organize and to build leadership. And for instance, CDF, that's been doing it. For instance, in Warangal and surrounding areas, ordinary women, ordinary people without any great education or experience in running a business or enterprise or in public affairs, they have now acquired so much of confidence and skill. They're able to run their thrift organizations with hundreds of crores of rupees reserves available, managing the finances superbly, and preventing undue external interference from political parties and other busybodies. They're very effectively, firmly controlling that. So leadership is rising. So you do require some mechanism to nurture that. Once they understand and experience the fruits of that freedom and benefits of leadership of quality, then it's self-sustaining. But until that stage, some amount of support is required from well-meaning and genuinely committed organizations to nurture leadership and to build that capacity for self-reliance.
So what is that one conversation with Mr. Ramareddy that you'll always remember?
There are many, but his tactical shrewdness was brilliant. I remember I was fighting for Right to Information Act, and I always felt, I wrote about it repeatedly, while political parties are not part of the government, you cannot treat them as private organizations. Because what is political party? At the heart of it, a political party is a forum for political participation of all the citizens. It's a platform for participation of all citizens. While theoretically non-party participation is possible, in reality, almost nowhere in the world is it feasible. So political party is a necessary intermediary for a citizen to play a meaningful role in the public activity. What does the party seek? As opposed to a voluntary organization, how is a party different? It is seeking your vote. It is seeking control over your purse. Tomorrow, while in government, not only with your vote do they make policies and laws, They also control the public purse. All your tax money they want to control and decide how to spend that. The moment anybody wants that power, you cannot treat them as a private entity. It has to be accountable. It must be treated on par with public authorities. And therefore, parties must be regulated under the Right to Information Act like any other public authority, was my argument. Particularly in matters of funding, in matters of internal democracy, in matters of how the choice of candidates is made, in matters of membership. You can't arbitrarily allow or disallow. I cannot say, I don't like Ankit's face, therefore I don't allow him to become a member of my party. Or so-and-so is becoming a threat to me, therefore I expel him. This is a normal pattern in India. Then where is the political party? Where is democratization? So I believe that's a worthy cause. Mr. Ram Reddy told me very wisely. He said, look, you are right in principle. But you must decide whether by pursuing the principle, you will actually lose the battle, the war itself. That means you will not get the act. Because after all, who are the people who have to enact the law? The political parties and the elected representatives of the political parties. If you are saying the party will now be controlled, regulated by this law and subject to public scrutiny, given India's conditions today, do you think they will enact a law? Out of the question. If I figure out a way of not explicitly in their face telling them that you are accountable to people under this law, but get the law in the first place. So I made sure that we defined public authority in a manner that any organization that receives direct funding or indirect subsidy, like tax exemption, etc., to a certain tune, will have to be covered by the Right to Information Act. But it did not explicitly say political parties will be under this law. It was a very instructive lesson. It's not enough to be a principle. It's not enough to be accurate or correct. In a democracy, what's important is achieving the result. Sometimes the impossible best is the enemy of the possible good. Sometimes you can actually achieve the best without being confrontational. Right to Information Act in this respect is a good example.
Thank you for taking us on the journey, sir, and sharing your perspectives today.
My pleasure.